Chapter 8b. Jody bit her lip and shook her head. She was determined to stay and see what happened with her own eyes. She wanted to know if a dolphin was hurt or frightened by what Dr. Taylor did. Finding the gun, Dr. Taylor checked it. Then, steadying his elbow against the side, he took careful aim and fired. The gun made a sharp snapping sound, and then a high whine as the dart shot out. The dolphins responded immediately, disappearing beneath the water, the entire group moving as one. From the hydrophone amplifier came the sound of rapid, high-pitched chattering, as if though Jody, the dolphins, were all exclaiming and asking one another what just happened. "I couldn't see whether or not you hit one," said Craig. "Neither could I, but I'll tell you in a minute," said Dr. Taylor. He bent down again, creaking like one of the dolphins, and replaced the gun in his bag. Then he took out something that looked like a palm-sized computer. He pressed a couple of keys, checked the display, pressed again, and nodded, satisfied. Bingo! Jody could still hear the clicks and squeaks coming from the hydrophone. So, although she couldn't see them, she knew the dolphins must be near, as the hydrophone's range wasn't very wide. She leaned over the side and gazed down into the water. Deep in the blue, there was a shadowy shape. 2, 3, 6. Jody broke into a grin. Below the water, the dolphins were still following the boat. One or two lazily kept pace, while others shot forward, flipped over and came back and swapped places. Eventually, in 5 or 10 minutes, they would have come up for air, but they weren't in no hurry. "What do you see?" asked Gina, leaning close. "Ah," she said, "I guess he didn't scare them off. The water certainly is clear today, and it doesn't seem as deep here, I wonder." Jody turned to look at her. "What are you thinking?" Gina smiled. "What do you think I'm thinking?" "I know what I'm thinking. That this would be a great place to dive," Jody exclaimed happily. "You could be right," her mother nodded, returning her smile, then examined the brightly blue water again. "It looks to me like we might be getting closer to the Florida Reef. It's the only living coral reef in the United States, and it's what makes the water of the Keys such a paradise for divers. I'll go and check the navigation charts just to be sure, and I'll have a word with your father and Harry." A few minutes later, Harry was giving orders to heave to, and Jody hurried below to change. Brittany was in her cabin, painting her nails dark purple. She stared at Jody. "Are you actually going into the water with a whole herd of those animals?" "If they stick around, I am," Jody replied. "You must be crazy," Brittany said flatly. "I can't believe your mother is going to let you do that, after what she said." "What? What did she say?" Jody was bewildered. "I overheard her warning you a while ago. She said that dolphins were wild animals and you couldn't trust them. She said there had been accidents and people had gotten hurt." Brittany tossed her wavy hair back from her face and stared accusingly at Jody. "Yes, accidents," Jody stressed. "Dolphins don't hurt people, not normally. It's people who hurt dolphins. And I guess sometimes if people get too rough with them, then the dolphins might feel threatened and get rough back to defend itself. Mom just meant that you have to respect wild animals. Don't do things that they might misunderstand. Let them come to you if they want. You can't force them." Brittany looked down and blew on her nails. "Oh, so it was like really smart of you to make that dolphin give you a ride." Jody's jaw dropped. "I didn't make Apollo do anything, Brittany. It was all his idea." "Sure," Brittany smirked in a self-satisfied way. Jody opened her mouth to argue, but then she stopped. She couldn't force Brittany to believe her. She shrugged. "Have it your way." On deck, Jody and her parents discussed their dive plan. She was glad to see the dolphins were still hanging around the boat. "They might head for the hills when they see us coming," scary-looking critters that we are, with our tanks and regulators and fins," Craig warned jokingly. Jody nodded, but she had a feeling the dolphins would stick around out of curiosity. Dolphins seemed utterly fearless creatures to her. They would even headbutt sharks. It was only human beings who had ever posed a threat to dolphins, and yet, despite years of being captured, hurt, or killed, dolphins went on trying to make friends with people. Craig insisted it was his turn to use the camera. "I'm sure our viewers would rather see two lovely mermaids than watch me flopping around." "I wasn't planning on having you on camera, darling," his wife said dryly, "and our sponsors won't appreciate it if you produce a home video of your wife and daughter. I don't even want it switched on unless you're pointing it at dolphins." Jody went through the drill carefully with her parents, checking her tank and regulators, running through the few simple hand signals they would use to communicate underwater, indicating if there was any problems or that it was time to return. She felt extra alert, excited by the prospect of entering the dolphins' territory on their terms. Although it had been wonderful to swim with Apollo, without scuba equipment she hadn't been able to dive very deeply or stay underwater for more than a couple of minutes. This time, although she knew she would still be weak, slow, and clumsy in comparison with the dolphins, at least she would be able to stay in the dolphins' underwater world longer and start to understand them better. Do you dive, Dr. Taylor? Gina asked. "I'm afraid I can't," he replied. He pointed to his head. "Trouble with my ears, you see." He didn't sound sorry, Jody thought. He wondered if he ever liked dolphins, but she had better things to do. She had better things to think about. It was time to dive. The dolphins moved away from the boat as Jody and her parents entered the water, but they did not go far. They were obviously curious about these visitors. They hung in the water, barely moving, just watching. Clearing her eyes, Jody sank down through the clear blue water. She added some air to her buoyancy vest and her decent slow. She hovered, trying to imitate the dolphins' posture and to keep as still as they did. It made her think of some silly game where the first one to move was out. Suddenly, one of the dolphins darted forward. It shot straight towards her. Jody tensed, half expecting a collision, but the dolphin came to a halt right in front of her. Its beak was just inches from her mask. The friendly bottle-nosed face seemed to smile at Jody. She noticed a stream of silvery bubbles rising from the blowhole on the top of its head. After a few seconds, the dolphin dropped a little lower in the water to circle her. The beak came questing forward, but never actually touched her. Then, with a push of its flippers, the dolphin moved away. Jody decided to go after it, kicking with her own rubber fins. But even though the curious dolphin had seemed to be moving very slowly, she couldn't catch up with him. As soon as Jody gave up on the chase, two other dolphins appeared, one on either side of her. And that's all for today.